Welcome everybody and thank you all so much for joining us here today. My name is Berat and I will be moderating our panel Where Purpose Meets Design. I work as a senior strategist at HMD and come from a design background as well, so moderating this panel is a dream come true for me actually. I feel like my background and what I do for a living right now has finally come together at this very moment. Today we will deep dive into the central question of what is the relationship between design and purpose. It is indeed a complex question, so we have gathered three experts from different spectrums of design to hear insights through the lens of both practitioners, academics, and design strategists. Let me welcome our panelists to the stage and introduce them to you. Hello, hi there.
Hi.
Hello, hi, hello everyone.
Hello.
Let me start with introducing you just a little bit. Professor Carlos Teixeira is the Charles L. Owen Professor in Design at IIT Institute of Design. He teaches graduate courses and advises doctoral students on the strategic use of design capabilities in complex spaces of innovation. He is also the director of Institute of Design Action Lab, so thank you so much for joining us here today. Also joining us here today is Emilie Stuhr. She is an applied cultural analyst working as a lead consultant at a world-famous design agency, Is It a Word? She's an anthropologist, so her expertise in understanding the true underlying deep human needs and values puts her at the front end of both design and human-centered innovation. Thank you so much, Emilie, for joining us again. And lastly, we have Erdem Akan here with us today. He is the design director of Eczacıbaşı building products, which I think many of you would be familiar with, like especially those of you who are from Turkey, with brands like Vitra and Artema. He has been working as a designer for over 25 years within different scales of companies and in a variety of industries. I also want to add that Erdem is one of the most inspirational people we work with as HMD in different experimental projects. So thank you so much, Erdem, for being us here with today. And thank you all so much for joining us. I want to jump right into our discussion by asking why it's important to talk about design when we talk about purpose in the first place. While it seems organizations and people's perception of design has changed, the purpose has also become an urgent and very discussed topic. Why do you think they both become crucial today? And is there some simultaneous rise is more than a coincidence? And Erdem, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, thank you very much, Berat. And I think this is a very, very interesting topic. And thank you for this opportunity, because it gives me a kind of a looking back to my own history, what I did, how I did, and what was the relation in everything, what was the meaning. So it was an opportunity for me to also to review my personal story. So let me start with my personal story. So I started my design career in the mid of 90s. And there I was lucky because I started at the Ford Motor Company, and it was a dedicated design studio. So in those times, it was not many organizations who had dedicated design studios. So design was a part of something under some other departments and so on. But I was lucky, as I said. And then, but even in these dedicated studios, it was mostly seen design as a tool to make things more beautiful, like styling. So that was actually the main purpose of the design at that as a tool. And then today is we are a little bit more lucky because it's a part of the strategy, because I think the organization understood that just using the design and as a tool for product development is not enough. So, for example, companies like in my company Vitra, we are using it also for roadmaps and using as a product strategy tools. So, but still, I think there is a gap between the world of the design and the world of the business. I think this gap is quite huge. So when I think of this gap, maybe I can define it like this. So design to me is more about getting a meaning. So it's to find and to define a meaning, and then it's based on and starts with exploring the values. It starts with researching the values. So what are the current values of the society, and how can we change these values in a deeper way or in another way for a better good, for a better meaning, and so on. But on the other hand, the business, the main objective of the business is when we think it's about the growth. So it's basically about the profit, and it's about the reality. And there, I sometimes also make some readings on philosophy and so on. And one of my favorites are the political philosophy from the 20th century, Leo Strauss. And that was his studies about the critics about the modernity. And then he was comparing the modern people with the ancient people, because he was arguing that the modern people after the Enlightenment, they are rational, okay, but also the people in the ancient Greek, they were also rational. But the way they created the institutions and everything is quite different than today's organization. So, and he deeper research for what is the main difference between these two things is he found out that, okay, ancient Greeks were working towards ideals. They knew that there is no ideal. You can never reach the ideal. So they were not crazy people. But at least this kind of methodology helped them to get their purpose, and then they can evaluate and they can reorganize within the changes. So, but today's people, the modern people, that we are also part of it, and so on. So we are more after the real. So we just measure the real, and we are mostly value natural. So we are all individuals, and we say, okay, it's your value, it's my value, so I don't care. But so we only try to make the business. But this is a dry business, and we see today, I think, that after all these years and so on, how I feel is like we realize that it is not sustainable, and this is why we are here. I think that to discuss how to bring the purpose into the business.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erdem. I think that was really great, and actually what you said changed my next question entirely. So because it was such a great introduction to also what we are trying to say and what we are trying to find out here. What I think that you were saying was critical, that the gap is closing, yet the gap is still here. So my next question is actually about this gap. So maybe I can throw the ball to Emilie and ask her, as this gap started to closing, we saw that the role of a design agency, especially strategic design agency, also has been redefined, right? In a sense that now major design strategy studios are also advising and giving out consultancy work as if they were management consultancy. And that was not something that we could have dreamed about maybe 20 years earlier. So what do you think about this gap, and as it's closing, how do you think that it is changing the your landscape of design strategy?
Yes, of course, and thanks for the opportunity to be part of this panel. Well, I think first that you can say that the value proposition has become more closer to the center of business, and because designers are skilled at working with value proposition, that has come to become a natural outcome of that shift. So putting the core and the customer and the customer interaction with a certain product at the center of business, and then looking at the value proposition makes or forces businesses to actually pay attention to the design in many parts of the process, making that gap smaller. But maybe I can also add a note to what you're saying, Erdem, in terms of this the ancient Greeks and the historic development of people, because coming from my background as anthropologist, there is always this constant negotiation between what we practice and the ideals that we set aside or that we have in our minds. And sometimes the ideals are more explicit, and sometimes they are more unknown and are within ourselves without we actually become aware of having those ideals. And I think that's also where the designer's skill sets can play an important role, is getting these ideals at the forefront of the conversation and having that bounced up against reality and the way people then practice and use and live with products in that sense. So that shift, I think, is, or that bridge between the ideal and the practice is a constant one. I think you can track that back ancient times, but how it comes into play is changing. And I think the designers and the businesses has made a great work in getting that tool set out more explicitly, and businesses are seeing that as a value that they can profit from. So let's also be honest that if it wasn't good business, it wouldn't have had that position in the companies as well as today.
I think that was also a great point. And also I'm going to jump actually into that discussion later on. And I want to actually deep dive into what does designs actually proposition brings into business. But I have one question for Carlos actually, and I think it ties in really well with what you have talked about ancient Greens, and we always had these kinds of fundamental values. So Carlos, I believe in a previous speech that I have listened to, you stated that we became aware that the systems of today are producing unintended consequences that we couldn't anticipate when we were creating them. I think that's a great perspective shift moment for me, and I think it really ties in well with this discussion, because today we are actually discussing the fact that, oh, the old ways are not actually sustainable, the old ways are not actually producing the right results and the right values for us. So how do you think that purpose relates to that statement and that awareness, and can you please elaborate on that thought for us?
Thank you very much, and great pleasure to be here. I think the key point is the fact that purpose was always there, and it was a driving force in what we design. But if you think about the 20th century, one of the main purposes was to improve the quality of life of people. We have a growth in human population from almost like 2 billion people in the planet in the beginning of the 20th century, and up to 7 billion people by the end of the 2000s. So this growth, the big question there was, how do we give quality of life to people? And mass production, mass consumption was the main driver of that. So design and industry was capable of doing marvels and extending people's expectation of life, reducing child mortality. And one very particular example is like the fact that we increase transportation, and we could have much higher mobility for people, with much more choices for people where they could live, where they could visit, and where they could go. So all those are really very well-designed systems of the 20th century: mass production, mass consumption. So producing things with high quality at affordable prices. But those have unintended consequences. So when you think about pollution and the consequence of the warming planet, this is an example of something that a previous system that has very well-intended goals now has unintended consequences that was hard to predict at the beginning. Later in the 20th century, it became very evident that if we continue that scale, now we are in the tipping point where we are seeing those consequences. So from a design point of view, I think that we are now having to rethink the purpose, because the purpose is not only doing mass production, mass consumption, and it's for us now to think the future in terms of sustainability, in terms of inclusion, because, for example, mass production, mass consumption not necessarily was capable of including everybody in this development. So it's up to question that there was very good intentions and purpose over there, but it didn't achieve its full intention and generated unintended consequences.
I think that was also great, and it really ties well in what was already talked about during the PurposeNOW conference, especially that we are at that tipping point and we have to actually rethink the whole purpose of our systems that we have built and we believe to be true to this day. And I think that's a great actually reflection moment for any of us who are listening and watching. So what's the system that we are actually living in, and what the consequence it brings to? And so much, thank you so much for actually elaborating. Now, my next question is a little bit biased, but I couldn't help but asking it. So especially now as working as a strategist, I see that many organizations and especially businesses have really hard time integrating design into their daily routines and actually embedding design into their core DNA. Why do you think they have so much hard time? And maybe Erdem, you would like to start?
Thank you, Berat. I think the thing is quite complex, because there are things which are visible and there are things which are not visible. So, and then if something is not too visible, then it is also not easy to tackle. So to understand maybe this question, we have to look into to the culture of the organization. So I mean, if you think of the culture, so we can find 3 layers. We can find in practically in any organization 3 layers almost. So one of them is the layer that this is the outside, the outer shell. We can say, okay, this is a layer of the method. So this is a visible layer of the visible artifacts. So like the tools, the organization charts, and I don't know, the processes and so on. So this is the hard shell of the organization. And mostly when people want to talk about the change, so they are trying to change this layer. So changing the organization, changing the tools. Sometimes even if they say, because as Emilie said, there was, and Carlos also put it very clearly, that design is always this purpose. Design is always this ideal. So, and I think this is also why we have been taught like a little bit romantic in sometimes. So that, because I mean, like we were not, they were thinking, or people were thinking like, okay, we are not seeing the reality. No, we see the reality, but we see also because we want to change it. So we want to see also the potentials. So that doesn't mean that we are not realistic, but we are seeing the beyond reality. But anyway, so, but first at changing the organization, because this layer is very visible, people want to attack first this layer, and they say, okay, why don't we apply even design here? And the methodology of design thinking has been applied in the last 10 years to many companies, to many places. It has been success to a certain level, but it doesn't brought the perfect solution, because I think you have to go deeper. And the next level is kind of I can say it's the layer of the message. The layer of the message consists of declared values. So as a company, you say, this is my vision, this is my mission, and this is how I work, and so on. So this is a declaration. But there also at that level, it stays only as a declaration. And if you don't apply, to any decision you make, then it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So to make it work, you have to go one layer deeper, which is the mindset. And there, Berat, I think is the core, because there you find the lifestyles. Because if you talk about the understanding the customers or users, you have to understand their lifestyles. So I mean, Emilie knows much better than me. Sorry for talking about things like this. But I mean, we talk about the values. We talk about the industrial values and the company values and so on. And they are not visible. They are very much hidden. You cannot easily put them into words, and you cannot measure them. You cannot give a numeric numbers like, okay, today values are 1% higher, tomorrow is 1% less. No, it doesn't work. So it is really very abstract, and it is not visible. So it is hard to tackle. So I think this is the problem, that the disconnect is in the mindset. So between the design and the business, the disconnection is in the mindset. It's not at the practical level. It's not at the the discourse level. It's at the mindset level.
I very much agree. If I can just add the point, Berat, that I think it's also because it's a symptom of what is more easy to actually approach, is the what we do and the agreement of how we do these things that we can talk about and that we can see and that we have written down in paper. But what is in the mindset and the internal values and assumptions and traditions and norms and ways of working, they're first of all implicit, and second of all, if we bring them about, they're also very chaotic and different to change. And it's not just about installing a facilitator in a workshop and then we fix the mindset. It's something that requires long thought processes and complicated ways of getting to see oneself in a different perspective and bringing in new values and new ideas and thoughts and reflections. So it's also where the workload is the heaviest and the most difficult to actually handle in a way. And design thinking is one way of approaching it, and what we've been successful with running such courses for different companies that makes them enabled to start that journey, but it's often a very long journey that takes a long time to get the mindset in a certain different track that enables the designers to play a different role and the purpose to have an actual value in the organization.
If I quickly may expand on that, I think it's an important point that we also bring that into the design field. And we also consider that we have been too focused on human-centered design, which has been doing great things and was very important for the design of many innovation. But at the same time, user-centered design or human-centered design focus a lot on a specific type of user and specific type of situation. So it's for companies, they have to also go beyond. It's not to just eliminate human-centered design. They first have to incorporate human-centered design, I hope so. And then they also have to expand that to the notion of the common good. So this is something that is not frequently discussed in organizations, is that how do we design beyond just the needs of a specific situation or a specific individual? And how do we start thinking in the larger context of the implications and the products that we design? So this notion of designing for the common good at the same time that we are designing human-centered products and service is a challenge for organizations and also for the design field. We also have to start to looking for ways that we can do that.
Thank you so much. I was just going to actually give the word to Emilie and then Carlos, but it's such a lovely discussion and you are so in it and then you take the charge and I'm so beyond happy about that. Actually, what you were talking about brings up our next two questions. I think it connects greatly. The first of all, Carlos, I know that in Institute of Design Action Lab, you actually work towards actually the most challenging epistemic problems of today, but you are trying to actually solve those problems by using participatory processes. So I think that ties in well with what you were saying, which is the next level of maybe design thinking and human-centered design, which is to make sure all stakeholders are in and they are actually gathered around that common purpose. My question to you is that when there are so many voices in that discussion and when there's so many stakeholders around, how do we and how should one manage all the interest and go towards a common purpose when creating a new product and or creating a new solution?
Let me just say that I believe that we as a field, the design field, is just starting to grasp with that kind of challenge. So I don't think that there are long histories of participatory design in many other ways, but I think that we reach a scale and a challenge that is unprecedented. So I think that we have to keep in mind that there is no single and simple solution, and we are in the early stage of, as a field, as a community, to work through that challenge. But let me start answering that by bringing back what Erdem was saying before, especially when he was talking about his own experience as a designer, working in the early stage of his career in creating styling and product. This is an example where design was primarily in the position of doing meaning making. Designers were part of a process, but very late in the stage where all the definitions were already made about the products, and designers were the one creating meaning out of all those concepts. What we are experiencing now, and design thinking and the ability of bringing design to the early stage of the design process, allows us to bring design to do choice making. So it's a big change when you go from meaning making to choice making, where designers are working in the conceptualization of choices, creating alternative and different options for that. And designers alone cannot do that, and doing that in large scale with problems that has a system scope is the challenge of today. So I'm not pretending that I have the answer, but I'm just going to report of what we have been trying to do in the Action Lab at the Institute of Design. It's primarily to think in terms of building entrepreneurial ecosystems. It's not enough to do participatory design. It's not enough to do human-centered design. It's not enough to do co-creation. it needs to bring together an entire ecosystem, the multiple parts that are involved on the design of specific solutions. Things that relates to the level of products, to the level of platforms, as well as to the levels of policies and values. So all those different levels need to be designed, and all the stakeholders involved in those different levels need also to be involved. But they cannot be involved only as participants. They need to be involved as entrepreneurs. So this idea of building ecosystems that address the multi-levels of the system and make everybody work together as entrepreneurs allows us to bring design methodologies such as prototyping. But now it's not prototyping a product or service, but prototyping large-scale transformation. So that's the work that we have been doing at the Institute of Design, is this notion of prototyping large-scale transformation by bringing together multi-stakeholders and working through design methods as an entrepreneurial ecosystems. So change is not going to be a silver bullet and one solution. It's going to be something that depends on the transformation, and we need to have the ability of prototyping those transformations and learning also what are the unintended consequences that will be generated by that, and iterating and trying to come up with multiple choices that allows us to think about different futures.
I think that was great, and I think the point that you are making about transformation being a multi-stakeholder process, and everybody has to be in the part of it, and everybody has actually need to take charge and prototype and actually move towards, is actually what really ties in well with what we do at HMD. So I'm kind of like very excited to hear about that. But also I kind of wonder that when we are trying to do that, I think it is very important to actually get the core real insight, so that we are actually moving forward and we are doing the right thing. And for that, I kind of want to ask my next question to Emilie. And how do you think that exploration of people's needs and deep down values translate into tangible strategies for transformation, for innovation, or for design even?
Yes, I think it's a really good question. And what we are also working with our clients is actually having the greatest scope of collaboration is the ones that starts out with a curiosity to whether we've understood the problem the right way. Are we asking the right questions from the starting point, or do we already have a solution in mind and we're just confirming our worldview and building that solution? So that's the way we work with it. Is the first step is to challenge that, and then go out and look for what is actually the real problem that we want to solve, the human problem that we want to solve with the product or the innovation pipeline that we've put out there. That brings a lot of insights that can be quite untangible and difficult to translate. But we are working really closely with our collaborators in then creating opportunity spaces that are pointing to that future space, and in way of having an innovation white space where we can then be concrete within that space. And we know then that this space has been somewhat founded in a human need or a human context or a human understanding. But within, of course, the business scope and where we have an opportunity to do something, we have an opportunity space. Then the next step would then be to say, out of those opportunity spaces, we see these different ideas, and we then develop prototypes to become more concrete. And that involves often quite a very intense process of actually sprinting and doing a lot of ideation and coming up with ideas, and then having us as an external agency to support that validation of ideas and testing and proving those up against the human needs. So there is a long process following that human needs, where we need to translate, and we do that by, of course, translating it into opportunities, but then also into specific prototypes that we can also then validate again to the customers and the consumers that we have identified is the real consumer, which might not also be the one that we thought in the first place. So there is a lot of questions and a lot of new questions that arise out of such a process, but the clients that are in the right mindset, going back to that, is often the ones who are most happy and see the real value of having the needs at the center of the innovation or at the beginning of the innovation process.
That was also, thank you so much for that. I think the theme of transformation and theme of actually looking into the value more than looking into profit is just what comes a lot in our discussion. Now I have one last question, and I would be very happy if you can all answer that. And as we talked about earlier, and now that organizations are on a journey to become more purposeful, how should they maybe position design in this journey? Because we all know that they do position it sometimes wrongly. And what will be the one thing they should start doing tomorrow? Erdem, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, but I think the organization, as I said before, is about the mindset. So they should change the business mindset and adapt it to the design mindset. And let me explain what I mean by design mindset a little bit deeper. So I think there are maybe many characteristics, but maybe 3 of them are very typical. So which is also quite interesting, because I also can give you some examples how they may be resistance points for the business work. So one of them is we have to be open, because what we are trying to do is we are trying to make a future. So, and to make the future, you have to change, and to have to change, you have to be open. But the business is kind of, is programmed to be more for standardization. So, and then standardization can be a resistance for openness. So I think this can be a conflict. The second typical characteristic of the design mindset is to be playful. So in playful, I don't mean being just childish, which is also fine, but also being okay with failures. But again, the business world is mostly programmed with no failure. So if there's a failure, it's an alarm, it's an error. So, and then it's a bug in the system. So which is against the creativity, which is against, for making the future different. So I think this is also a kind of could be a conflict point that you have to you have a conflict with playfulness. And the third one is very, very important, is the empathy. And there is quite interesting, because today the business world is more empathic to the end users, because we all have learned that we must listen to the clients, we must listen to the users, and so on. But I think there is a very basic difference between the two mindsets. The design mindset there, by being empathic and listening to the end users, we are mostly coming from a pluralism rather than monolithic way of looking. What I mean by monolithic way of looking. So a business mind is always looking for a kind of a universal solution. So, okay, we find it. So we got it, we gathered, okay, that's it, and we find it. But this is not possible, because the human behavior is so complex that you need plural approaches. And you have to apply them at the same time, and different approaches at the same time, rather than trying to find an universal answer and universal solution. There is no such thing. So I think these three points of being empathic and being, but truly empathic, and being open for change, and then being also playful and welcoming failures is quite critical, that the organization has to change to find the purpose and to set the purpose, and then to apply it at every level.
Thank you so much, Erdem. That was actually great. And the 3 keynotes that you gave away, and I felt like maybe we should print them out and actually put them on our meeting board. So thank you so much. Emilie and Carlos, would you like anything to add to Erdem's comments? What do you think we should start doing tomorrow?
Yes, I will support Erdem's 3 words. I think they're really good and nice to you actually see the opposing side conflicting a lot. I can only agree that I've also seen these at play quite often. I would then throw in the next level ambition and say we should be aware of our biases. And biases is also a part of the designer's toolkit and my tool set. So working very consciously with unconscious bias, because then we can pinpoint if we're actually just designing stuff that we ourselves would like, or are we also designing for the common and the greater good, and for people who have a problem that we didn't see. So I think everyone should work with bias and have diverse teams with design skills incorporated in the entire innovation process.
This is fantastic, Emilie. I want to add it as a fourth
Yeah,
one.
as the
Yeah.
fourth one.
Good.
So Carlos,
You can have it.
thank you.
I would say that in addition to all they said, I think we are adding up. But I would say that one very important thing, both for business and design, is to understand that purpose and the specific areas of equity and sustainability are going to be the next billion-dollar industries of the 21st century. So the same way that companies have to marvel how to do high-quality products at very low price, they will have to do also as how do you design meaningful, inclusive, sustainable products that are also profit. So that's the challenge. That's where design and business can come together. Business has to start to realize that all the new values are not something that should be seen as a problem to be solved or just something good to do. It needs to be considered, what is the business case here? What is the business model? What is the business opportunity? So the moment that we put purpose around equity and sustainability as a business opportunity, we will have the market forces behind design to make that happen. And that's where we can bring design, as Erdem and Emilie were saying, with all our powerful methodologies, mindsets, and ways of working together with this rainfall of business-oriented and market-driven solutions. So I think the key point here for business is to start envisioning equity and sustainability as the next billion-dollar industry business.
Thank you all so much. I think we have wrapped up with great 5 key takeaways with this discussion. So I don't even need to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for joining us and joining me and also helping me moderating this panel. I really appreciated it. And also it's really gave me a much broader sense that now that I feel like I am really at the right place at HMD and doing strategy for purpose and human-centered transformation. So thank you all so much. And